What was the worst D&D experience you've ever had? The third and final part.
Disclaimer. This was just one part of an otherwise good campaign while it lasted, and the GM introduced a lot of elements of gameplay that I use still to this day. However, there were a few points that were hair-yankingly awful. Here's the worst. I was a wizard and we had a bard in the party as well. This group was massive, like 10 people, working adults whose schedules were not easy to coordinate. The GM introduced a rivalry between the boat crew and my character as we were making a long journey by sea. I discovered later that they found my spellbook and defaced it, ruining a few spells. Okay, not bad. It was clever and the rivalry was fun. I actually had no problem with that because I had pretty much established that my character was a know-it-all jackass who absolutely deserved this. Here's the problem why the GM did it though. In the following session, we were predictably shipwrecked on a foreign land and we had to converse with natives. One of the spells that I was deprived of was comprehend languages. So it was a puzzle to determine the native tongue. Remember, I mentioned we had a bard too. Bards also possess the comprehend languages spell, and they don't need a spellbook to use it. So the puzzle to figure out the language could have been avoided if the bard player had not caved and promised not to use it for no other reason than to do the puzzle. We spent almost 5 hours on this for no reason whatsoever. Remember, working adults, hard to schedule, this was not the best use of session time. In general, I don't like real-world knowledge puzzles. The main reason is that I am not playing myself, and your character stats don't factor into it at all. My character had 20 intelligence, so presumably my character is smarter than me, which means my inability to solve these puzzles renders my stats meaningless, making role-playing much more difficult. So there were other puzzles this GM used that were similarly obnoxious and pointless, but that one took the cake because in a misguided effort to be polite, the bard player decided not to use a spell for precisely the reason that spell exists in the first place. I was the DM, and it was a pretty generic starting scenario. The players were all youths in a remote society and had to perform a coming-of-age trial to become full adults. Of course, something tragic was going to happen, and plot would ensue. We never got that far. I was going to give them some smaller quests first to help them gear up and get them a level. The quest giver was a stern but kind mentor they knew throughout their childhood called the Constable, and his job was to get them prepared for a possibly dangerous ordeal. The problem was, the party started making jokes about how he was a child molester, and wouldn't fucking let it go. They developed crude backstories about the outrageous and improbable abuse they had suffered, and would actively avoid him, to the point of hiding or running if he came looking for them. Even after I went out of character and explained how the campaign was set up, they decided their stupid joke was more important, then later had the gall to complain about how we were 3 sessions in and nothing was happening. I told them to get the fuck out of my house, and some of them I've never gamed with again. Having the neutral good ranger wanting to poison my cavalier in his sleep. I thought it would be fun to play the stereotypical knight who would never back down, who valued honor above all else and such. It did not, however, work out very well. He was an absolute beast in combat, and could mow through things like mad, but his code made him a less than ideal traveling companion. I could see the other characters had an issue with mine, even though the other players didn't have an issue with me. But I got to the point even I didn't like the character, but I felt like I was stuck. It's not like he could simply do a 180 with his personality, so after talking it over with the DM, we ran into a large army of goblins, orcs, hobgoblins, and even a dragon. He told the party to continue on without him, and he'd catch up after he dispatched the rabble. Shortly after that, my new character was introduced to the party. It was only bad because I'm a big Drow fangirl. I love Drow, and I've read all the books I could get my hands on. I started a D&D campaign with my ex and a stepdad and some others, and I was controversially a half-Drow in a party of elven rangers primarily. I couldn't remember the campaign, but one of our encounters was a small Drow party. I was stunned. We were like level 1. We were going to get the floor mopped with us. I was quickly angered that we wiped out these Drow easily like they're goblins or rats. What the fuck? They're Drow. Their enchantments alone should have been enough to repel us. And they weren't supposed to be rebel surface Drow, they were supposed to be some ruling house guards. How dare they make Drow pushovers? New Dungeon Master. A somewhat experienced player who decided that they were going to run a module but did absolutely no prep work. Before each encounter, each room, he'd stop to read that portion of the module to himself. Then he'd look up stuff in the book or the SRD. Thanks to search features, that didn't take too long, mercifully, but he was not a especially fast reader. If the book didn't have an explicit read to the players section, it didn't get described. He'd pore over the book and then suddenly call for someone to make a saving throw or skill check. Why are we doing this? Oh, the floor is moving. Torturous. It was a new group that I found via the local shop. I turned up to the first session. Of the 5 people there, 2 were stoned. The third decided to play a female character that did nothing but try to jump into bed with everyone she met. Some deep-seated issues there. The DM and I just basically gave up on the game after the first hour, and that was the end of the group. We once had a feminazi in our group who took everything personally instead of as role-playing. She was the sister-in-law of the DM and sister to one of our other female players, and it was her first D&D campaign. She got extremely pissed off at my enraged barbarian riding her druid's bear form. She tried to get me off, but there's no way I'm going to lose at a strength check with advantage with 20 strength, so she took it as me and the DM oppressing her and left the game and house. Then she got pissed off the next session because we continued the game pretending her bear form just ran off. Then she got pissed off because she didn't get a say in the loot we got. She quit a few sessions later, making the game much more enjoyable for the rest of us. Moral of the story, don't be a real-life jerk to your co-players. We're just trying to have fun. I was once playing in a campaign and we were just starting the Temple of Elemental Evil. I was playing as a female elf cleric, and in one of our early battles, I had gotten a staff of striking as part of my share of the spoils. Unfortunately, all the charges had been used up by the previous owner, so it's essentially just an ordinary staff until I could get it recharged at the next town. We then encountered a large monster while exploring the dungeon. We strove to defeat this monster, but seemed to be making no headway against it, and eventually had to retreat. After the session ended, the DM let us in on why we were having so much trouble with the monster. Unbeknownst to us at the time, the monster was invulnerable to non-magical damage. Only magical weapons and spells could do damage. Unfortunately, my staff of striking was the only magic weapon we were using, and the DM allowed the damage to count. However, it was only doing a single hit point of damage to the monster, which was the only damage it was suffering. This was my first and only experience with AD&D. I had already played some 3.5, so I knew a bit of how the game was played. I had traveled with a friend to another town to join a game his friend was running. The first strike against the game was the GM had already pre-made all the characters for the campaign. I understood it was in order to save time, so I didn't complain. Second, I was on the other side of the room when the GM said for everyone to come pick a character. It was like a mad feeding frenzy. There were 8 or 9 people there. I finally get in and get the final remaining character. He was a sorcerer with only 4 hit points. Super squishy. I'm okay with it. I can handle arcane casters. So finally the campaign starts. We walk into a dungeon. No explanation why, we just do. Another sign of a great GM. My guiding trait being curiosity and seeking of knowledge, my character walks in and looks around. Okay, maybe not the smartest move for a sorcerer, but I was fairly new to role-playing, and trying to stay in character. I'm told by the GM there appears to be a bundle of rags in the corner. My character goes over to investigate, then a bony hand immediately reaches up and crushes his windpipe immediately. Dead sorcerer, right off the bat. Room full of skeletons for a first-level group. Only by the amount of players did they survive. As for the dead sorcerer, GM says, by the way, you can't make a new character. So I spent the next 4 hours bored out of my mind, half listening to a very boring, one-track campaign. The GM went so far as to have a tunnel collapse behind them when they started to talk about returning to town to resupply because they were all close to death. A long time ago, back in the 2nd edition days, I was in a large group that didn't know each other very well. One of the people chose to be chaotic stupid and anti-party. I was playing a character that was pretending to be a rich dignitary from a very faraway country to get the group some benefits from the local sultan. It was working fairly well, and I wasn't keeping the benefits to myself. The chaotic stupid party member decided to rat me out for the fun of it. The Sultan sent assassins in the night after me for the affront of tricking and defrauding them. The assassins countered my every move, including my psionic powers that I had never revealed to anyone but my party members. And then while we were on a different plane, the DM had every reason to kill my character. The order had been to kill. I got upset and split, and the DM tried to say that the assassins didn't kill me, just captured me. I didn't play with that group after that. I was totally justified in being pissed off that a party member betrayed me for no reason. I was totally justified in being pissed off that the DM targeted me. I wasn't acting smart or sane when the DM killed off my character and I had reacted poorly. The DM should not have retracted the kill just because my feels were hurt. The DM backpedaled because of my behavior, which hurt me more in the long run than a character dying, even one that I was so attached to. I never went back with that group, and I never gamed with a backstabber again. I'm glad I haven't seen him in the almost 20 years since then. This event has definitely colored my games since then.